Hello everybody! Besides learning languages, another thing I truly enjoy doing is traveling. I'm not one of those travel bloggers who have been to every country, but I have been to either 19 or 21 countries, depending on whether you want to count Taiwan and Palestine. Between the two times that I've been to Russia, I've lived there for about 3.5 years. Living in and having constant contact with another culture for an extended period of time can lead to some interesting experiences, and that's what I'd like to talk about in today's video. I was raised in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, more widely known as the Mormon Church. Like all young men in the church, I was expected to serve a 2-year mission after graduating from high school. Being a lover of languages and cultures, I hoped to be assigned to a different country speaking a different language, and that's exactly what I got. I put in my mission papers, as they say, and received a call to serve in the Russia St. Petersburg mission. A few months later, I would report to the Missionary Training Center, otherwise known as the MTC. Since I already knew the basics of Russian, I was put in the Russian-speaking group so that I could skip the language training and enter the mission field faster. I ended up serving in the state of Georgia for a few weeks while my visa was processing, but once it was ready, I was off to the land of bears, beets, and balalaikas. Not that I even knew those stereotypes at the time. I knew very little about Russia when I arrived. This was my first time traveling abroad and the one time in my life when I truly felt culture shock. I remember my first day sitting in a marshrutka, riding through the streets of Kolpina, passing all the enormous apartment buildings and thinking, I'm not in Kansas anymore. I had to relearn everything. I essentially had to relearn how to speak, use money, enter a building, use a toilet, and get from point A to point B. During my first few days as a missionary, my companion took me to the apartment of a member of the church for a visit. It was April and still quite cold, so we were wearing our winter coats. When the member of the church led us into his apartment, he said to me in a very friendly way, "Раздевайся." He could see that I didn't quite understand what he meant by that, and he tried to say it in English, "Clothes off." Then I thought, okay, now I'm really confused. My companion rephrased it and helped me understand that he didn't mean all my clothes, just my coat. In English, if someone says, take off your clothes, they don't just mean your coat and your boots. Anyways, lesson learned. Slowly I began meeting more and more locals, some of those who were members of the church, and some of those who weren't. Often, when I told people that I was from Utah, they would say, oh, you're from Utah? I bet this is the first time you've ever seen snow. And I was like, no, we definitely have snow in Utah. It snows every winter in my hometown. People come from all over the world to ski in our mountains. We hosted the Winter Olympics in 2002. It definitely snows in Utah. Another thing people would say was, I bet you were told there would be bears walking around the streets here. Now I know that Russia is often associated with bears, but I had never heard that at the time. I always associated bears with Yellowstone National Park. I didn't even know they had bears in Russia, although I probably could have guessed. As I learned the language, I noticed people referring to roller coasters as Amerikanskie Gorki, American mountains. I thought that was the funniest thing ever. I actually thought it was a joke at first, but I eventually realized that that's actually what they're called in Russian. American mountains. But whenever the topic would come up, people would be like, is it true that in America they're called Russian mountains? The answer is, нет. Public service announcement. Roller coasters are not called Russian mountains in America. I thought that was just a dirty rumor, but later I found out that in some languages, including Italian and French, they really are called Russian mountains. So there is some truth to that idea after all. This next one I heard many times. I can't tell you how many times someone would be like, did you know that a watermelon is a berry? No, I can't say that I did. Years later, my wife and I were eating watermelon. My wife, who is Russian, said something along the lines of, we need to eat more fruit. I responded, we are eating fruit. Watermelon is a fruit. She corrected me and said, no, watermelon is a berry, not a fruit. What? I didn't even know where to start. Even if it were a berry, never mind. Although maybe not all Russians would exclude berries from the fruit category. If you're Russian, let me know in the comments if you consider berries to be fruit. A novel concept that just blew my mind when I was in Russia was the idea that something could be too sweet. Oh, I don't like that. It's too sweet. To my American ears, that sounds like, oh, I don't like that. It tastes too good. But believe it or not, American compatriots, if you hadn't been raised on Cocoa Puffs, Twinkies, root beer, and weeks of Halloween candy, you might also think that some things could be too sweet, just like they can be too salty or too spicy. But even though my eyes have been opened to the madness, I've still never tasted something that I thought was too sweet. Case in point. As a missionary, my companion and I invited a 16-year-old boy and his friend over to the mission president's apartment for a missionary lesson of sorts. The mission president's wife baked these cookies in a casserole dish and topped them with ice cream. At the end of the evening, she wrapped a couple pieces in tinfoil and sent them home with our 16-year-old friend. When we left the apartment, he shoved the dessert into his friend's hands and said, "You take it. That stuff's way too sweet." His friend didn't want it either. "No, you take it. No, you take it." In my abundant benevolence, I said, "I'll take this off your hands." "What's the matter with you guys? These are good." But not everyone was raised with such a high tolerance for sweetness. Not that that's anything to brag about. Now, this last thing I'd like to mention I got from a comedy sketch, and it just blew my mind. So there I was, watching Diesel Show, one of my favorite comedy groups. I was making a transcript of the whole video so that I could translate it and hopefully learn some new words. But this one sketch just wasn't making any sense. There's a man in a doctor's office who says he needs to get zakazirvan, which translates to coded. Then they're talking about alcohol and how he can't drink anymore because he will be coded. I thought, maybe that's some sort of medical term. So I looked it up, and there's no such thing as being coded or medical coding. You can code, as in write computer code, but what does it mean if a doctor codes you? I was completely lost, so I asked my wife. She said that kaziravanya, coding, is when an alcoholic is desperate to quit drinking and they go to a doctor who gives them a shot. Once they get this shot, they cannot drink any more alcohol or they will get sick and die. Then the alcoholic does not drink anymore because they are afraid for their life. I was like, what? No way, that can't be real. So I looked it up again and I eventually found a Wikipedia article that explained how it works. Basically, coding therapy, also known as the Davzhenka method, is a therapy invented by Soviet psychiatrist Alexander Davzhenka that uses the placebo effect to help people stop drinking. So in other words, it's not real. But the only reason it works is because people think it's real. So, sorry for spilling the beans to anyone who would have relied on this method to quit drinking. You'll just have to try something different now. Well, that's about it for this video. I hope you learned something new, and be sure to share your stories about visiting Russia or other countries in the comments. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Although I probably won't see you. You'll see me. Anyways, bye-bye.